All right, welcome to this week's episode of Vets in Real Estate Podcast. I am joined by a retired Navy chief who's now doing all sorts of things in real estate. So stay tuned and let's hear what she's got to say. All right, Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your time and your story with our listeners. And again, just thank you for being willing to sit down and work through talking to me for the next 45 minutes or so.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you did 20 plus years or so in the Navy, I'm assuming, as being retired. What did you do in the Navy?
So my first 8 years, I was an ocean systems technician analyst. That job does not exist anymore to that degree. Basically, I track submarines from land-based bases, and then our rate changed into sonar tech. So that's the more widely known job field, the sonar techs that track the submarines, the hunt for red October, stuff like that. I did that for 8 years. I got out. I joined the reserve, and in the reserve, I ended up coming back on active duty right away because they needed a reserve recruiter at my reserve center. From there, I came back on active duty fully and recruited almost everything: high school kids, JAG officers, medical doctors, reservists, everything like that. So I spent 16 years recruiting after that.
So that had to be an easier transition. I've heard, at least from the Army recruiters, that's one of the best sales schools you can ever go to. And I mean, I would imagine you're talking people into trading years of their life for a steady income and some college money. That's got to be an easy transition, at least when it comes to the sales side for real estate. Yeah.
It is. The skill set is the same thing. So the Navy taught me that skill set to be successful in real estate. When I retired, I became a real estate agent. But the Navy taught me, the recruiting commands, they taught me how to keep a planner together, how to plan your day, how to make sure your production is where it is, we don't talk people into things. We figure out a way to put the puzzle pieces together. What is it that you're looking for, and can the Navy satisfy that need or want? Or if you don't know what you're looking for, then we'll dig a little deeper and find out what you're looking for, what's going to make you happy, or, anything like that. And real estate is the same thing. There are a lot of people who have no idea that they can buy a house. But the skill set of putting your planners together and prospecting to make sure that you have enough clients, to make sure that you have money coming in the door, because the military, you get that paycheck regardless of whether you're recruiting people or not. In real estate, the skill set is there, but if nobody buys a house, you don't get the paycheck. So it's a great way to build that piece of business if you do plan on going in any sales-driven profession when you get out. And real estate is one of those, of course.
So was the dream to always get out and be a real estate agent? Is that what kind of had, or was there a odd moment where like, maybe I should go sell a house?
No, the dream, well, if you could call it a dream, was to retire and take a high-powered world-traveling sales job. And then I ended up getting married again and having a surprise baby. So that kind of changed my ideas about flying off to Dubai and being, the exciting world of executive sales. But I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And my husband actually told me, well, you watch all those stupid shows on TV. Why don't you just sell houses? And I thought about that, but it was right after the market crashed. And I was like, it's not the best time to go in, but maybe it is the best time to go in. Maybe I can dabble in it while I'm on terminal leave and see how I like it. And then if not, then, oh, well, I got a real estate license. And I was pretty good at it. And I did sell a few lower priced houses. It was right after the market crash. There was, I was in Memphis at the time. We were stationed in Millington. There were some pretty rough houses over there. And it wasn't as sexy as people think when you go into real estate. You definitely don't put on high heels and lipstick and open doors and make lots of money. There was a lot of really disgusting houses after the crash. So I didn't know if I was going to stay. I didn't make a lot of money, but I did do well in it. So right as my husband PCS, we came to Atlanta, Georgia, and the market was starting to turn back around, and I was learning the trade. So it just kind of went from there, and I did well. I enjoyed it, just like I enjoyed recruiting, and that's where I started.
So you kind of came in with the idea of it's going to be HGTV, selling sunset, all that kind of fun stuff. How is that different? Because you're not the only agent that I've heard that has come in and said, "Oh yeah, I've seen it on TV. It's just going to be, just like Magnolia or like one of the other TV shows." How is it different? Like you actually bought the lie or bought the story. I don't know how you want to put it, and
Yeah,
then didn't
yeah.
have that
So
same experience.
yeah, well, you wear high heels the first day, and then you run and get some low flat shoes because you know that walking up and down stairs and stepping over, bad things in people's homes or foreclosed homes, that's not always fun. But you learn about different types of homes too, because and that's what you learn. You learn there are foreclosed homes. You learn there are good and bad neighborhoods. You learn about people, which in recruiting you kind of really get to know about people. I was a waitress in my former life, so I got to know a lot about people that way too. The houses themselves and the business piece of it, like I said, if you don't close on a house, you don't get paid. But at the same time, you don't push people into buying a house because then you're not going to have any continuing business. At this point in my career, here we are 13 years later, I don't really have to look for business because all of my business comes from referrals and past clients. So that means I'm doing something right, right? Um, but there's a lot of puzzle pieces you have to put together and a lot of emotion. So on every transaction, there are two parties. And sometimes two parties could be four people. That's four sets of emotions because buying and selling homes is an emotional business. So there's a lot of that you have to manage when somebody, says, "Oh my gosh, the HVAC unit is 10 years old. I don't want this house anymore." You have to be able to figure out how to handle those solutions. When you find out that somebody has laid claim to a property in probate, you have to be able to handle those solutions. So what the military helped me with was how to adapt and overcome and how to get through problems without just shutting it down. When you're in the military and a problem arises, do we just say, "Oh, well, nothing we can do about it"? No, we have to figure out what to do about it and get the mission taken care of, which the same thing in real estate. Because I have that skill set, I can take care of those things and put my planner together and figure out how to change the schedule because we do that a lot in the military too. We change our schedules to figure out what to do when something goes awry, if something catches fire. We know how to put the fires out and we know how to change our schedule to keep going with what we were planning to do before the fire started. That kind of thing. Does that make sense? Does that
Yeah,
answer your question?
absolutely. So, what was other than obviously everything's not $1 million mansion, and crawfish fisherman isn't buying the multi-billion-dollar house. What was the other things that coming from running the business that was kind of shocking to you as you made that transition out of the Navy?
I would say the other thing about running it is that you can never, when you run your own business, you can't anticipate your payments. So you have to plan way ahead. So in the beginning of running my business, if I had, for instance, I was in home sales, I do more than that now, but back then when I was just doing listings and working with buyers, um, a lot of people will bank on that one buyer closing on that house at the end of the month to get their paycheck. But some of those houses don't close. I mean, anything can happen between the time you go under a contract and the time you close. You can never count on your money. And the same thing, I learned that in recruiting too. You might have a lot of people who say, "Yes, I'm going to join the Navy at the end of this month," but then things come up. They might have medical issues. They might have police things that happen between now and the time they're supposed to leave for boot camp. So I'm glad that I learned that to not ever count on that. Because in real estate, you do the same thing. And in business in general, the same thing happens. I might have three people that are supposed to close on a house, but then one loses their job, one quits their job, one opens a credit account, and now they don't qualify anymore. So that's three paychecks that I'm not going to get because I can't control other people's actions or anything about the transaction. I can control what I can control, and that's to advise, to consult, to keep it all together, to put the puzzle pieces together. But I can't control if somebody decides to go on a cruise and spend their down payment money or their earnest money. I can't control if somebody loses their job. So those things. So you always have to be looking ahead. So if I know that I'm going to get three paychecks in January, I can't count on those paychecks, but I might get one of them. I might get all three of them, but I also have to look at February and March. So I have to prospect and look for my business in February and March to make sure that those are tracking so that I don't have to be scrambling and stressed out in February or March that I don't have a paycheck coming in. Because it takes a little longer for most people to decide to buy or sell a home. So they're not just going to get on the phone with me and say, I want to buy a house, and we go pick one that day. Sometimes that happens, but not always.
So what is it that, obviously coming from the military, it's the 1st and 15th, you're getting paid. All of a sudden you get paid with what you kill and eat, right?
Right.
What is, other than not anticipating every deal is going to close, how do you bridge that gap?
Well, I have a pension. I have a retirement, so that's been helpful to me. Not everybody has that. I also went to school my first 3 years, and I almost finished my business degree at that point, but then I got so busy that I didn't finish it, so I might be looking at that again in the future. But the GI Bill money, that helped me bridge that gap. It really, really made it possible for me to get a business started. I had a toddler at home, so I needed to be able to put my baby in a daycare so that I can really work. This is a business. And a lot of people, I think that, and I teach new agents too, so I see that a lot of people think, oh, this is a flexible work from home job. But it really isn't as flexible. It is flexible. And when you have your own business, there are some flex things that you can do in it, but you have to stick to your plan and you have to have time. You can't focus on real estate. I can't focus on doing market analysis with a toddler running around. So I did put that money. I had to budget money to put my toddler in daycare. I had to budget money to pay my car payment. I had to budget that all out and make sure that I had enough money left to start my business because it costs money to start my business too. So when I did that, I focused on some of the inexpensive ways to market, which a lot of that is social media and phone calls. I looked at what do you have more? What do you have more of, time or money? Well, I had more time because I didn't have a lot of clients yet. I hadn't built my book of business. I had very little money because I was just starting out. So phone calls, which that goes back to recruiting, phone calls are free. You can make phone calls all day long and it doesn't cost you anything. And you might get somebody on the phone that wants to buy or sell a house. The same thing with business. You know, I could create mailers or flyers and I could go to other businesses and put flyers up with my picture and what I do for a living and a QR code. I was even using QR codes before they got really popular, although nobody knew how to use them. So I kind of backed off of that for a minute. Now we're back to QR codes. But yeah, I just planned around the budget. I budgeted very strictly. If you've ever been young, you know how to budget strictly. But in real estate, you also have to show a presentation. When you get out of the Navy, you have no clothes. You have uniforms and maybe some jeans and some shirts or whatever. You don't really have a lot of civilian clothes to prepare you for business. What I did to get civilian clothes and things that could prepare me to be in business was I did mystery shopping for clothing stores. And I was able to get one article of clothing for free because, again, that goes back to what do you have more of, time or money? I have more time, so I could go do a mystery shop and do a report for a store to tell them about their customer service and I would get a pair of dress pants for free, or whatever I shopped
Mm.
for that day. So that was helpful to me to keep budgeting. But you can do little side hustles like that and keep things going. If you don't bootstrap your business in the beginning, it will be really tough to keep it going and to get it started. So a lot of people give up.
No, and I like what you're talking about the dress. I know that I laugh, and even my wife and I, she's like, you're going through your glow up phase, because here I am 10, 15, no, it's almost 15 years out of service, where like I'm now starting to figure out how to dress, right? Like it was weird because for so many years, the question was flight suit or BDUs, or flight suit or ACUs, or that was the choice for me, right? Did I want to wear my
Right.
flight suit, or did I want to wear the regular uniform?
Hmm.
Then it was okay, everything was black pants, and I didn't know how to match anything. And I think that's one of those weird things that maybe women get away with it better, because sometimes you be a little more fashion conscious. But guys, I think we're okay with a beer t-shirt and some cargo pants, and think that's going to be okay. How did you kind of struggle that same way of how do you dress like a person and not a sailor?
I did. I struggled with that a lot. I would go from one extreme to the other. And you see that a lot of women do that as well. When they get out, they make their hair very colorful. They get the long, drawn out nails.
Mm-hmm.
They have big earrings. I didn't do that. I did go with some color on my nails because, we have those requirements in the military that you have to keep your nails a certain length, a
Mm-hmm.
certain color. Your hair has to be a certain length, a certain color, or put up. Um, so a lot of women, and then we don't wear a lot of jewelry. So a lot of women struggle with that. I found a boutique that would help dress me, ironic, which was so fun because I kept dressing with the same clothes. I kept buying the same thing: black pants, white button up shirt, black sweater. Everything was the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or I had a problem with color. And if I would buy something that was colorful, I didn't know how to match
Mm-hmm.
everything else to it. I didn't know how to put on jewelry. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I did. I found a boutique that they actually just bring clothes to me, and they were bringing lots of colorful things to me. And I said, no, I can't do this. I'm not a color person. And they said, let's just try a color pop every once in a while. And they brought me pieces that mixed and matched
Mm-hmm.
so that I could have an entire wardrobe. And then they said, you can put all these pieces together and everything will match. And here's your color pop. So they would give me like a pink blouse with a ruffle on it, which was so out of my comfort zone. You know, here we are 15 years later. I know how to dress, and here I am in a hoodie, of course. But just got to get comfortable.
No, but I,
But
but I know at least in the Army transition program, I'm sure the Navy's was probably similar. As they brought in some people to kind of here's how you dress, but it was very buttoned up, very, I want to say polished. It was basic,
yeah,
and it's a little bit of a strange, a little bit of a weird transition. Again, you know, the choices of the service were pretty land where. Now you got to kind of be you, and then dressing for clients and dressing for who you want to be in business with. To me, I think that was really one of my biggest struggles was figuring out how to dress appropriately for those clients.
yeah, it was for me as well. And I think a lot of people do struggle with it. I do some leadership teaching courses and business. I teach some business classes, and one of the one of the many classes that I have for women, especially, is called Fix Your Face. And it's a new class. It hasn't started yet, but a lot of women struggle with being hard. And then we
Mm.
go into the civilian or the corporate world or business world, and we can't have that hard face that we had to do that to be in leadership a lot of times. So we still have it. It's still there. So we have to kind of learn how to smile, but then you start smiling and you look like a Barbie doll all the time, and that's not going to get you anywhere. So it's quite a balance of how to dress, how to speak, how to act. We can all stand up straight and be confident, but sometimes we're not confident because this is a new world for us. I mean, we're kind of institutionalized, So when we walk into the civilian world or the corporate world, it's a struggle when you're talking to, I talk to people from all backgrounds, from luxury backgrounds, CEOs of major corporations, um, brand new home buyers who have, went to college or not went to college. And, some of the things that they said, I couldn't relate to them. But one thing that I had to learn was how to smile without smiling too much, how to communicate without being too hard or too soft. That's a struggle, I think, when you start your business.
Yeah, I would agree. I think those interpersonal skills are sometimes difficult. And then I don't know if your business went this way. Mine, I kind of found myself working around more military, and we talk to each other differently. Very inappropriate humor, very blunt, very not. HR would be appalled, but it works because that's the way we communicate. When you can't communicate that way to sometimes your civilian counterparts or to your civilian customers, because they're just not going to get it, or it comes off unbelievably inappropriate.
Yeah, and there's HR rules out there that we're not accustomed to.
Right.
So, yeah, sometimes you feel like you're walking on eggshells when you're around others
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know what they can take and what they can't and what will get you in trouble regardless of what they can take and what they can't.
Right.
So it's definitely a delicate balance. I feel very at home when I have VA home buyers. I just relax completely because they already know that I can take control and handle things when I need to because they know my background typically. I don't share my background a lot with my civilian clients. They just know me as a realtor or a real estate broker or an investor. But with my military, they know my background, so we have that automatic connection. And I can relax a little bit, but also take care of business. So I think that's the same for almost all of us.
Yeah. So do you I guess in your business, you don't advertise yourself as the Navy chief. You don't put that front and forward, or?
I do sometimes. So
Okay.
when I market myself to veterans, VA loans, veteran home buyers, I teach veterans investing. And that is a great transition out of the military for a lot of people who are struggling with what to do. But I do identify myself as a veteran, as a retired Navy chief, depending on my clientele. Um, I have worked with CEOs of major companies, so I make sure that they know that I have a strong leadership background because sometimes they just think a realtor is a realtor. But once they realize that you have some sort of connection to what they do, then they relax and they feel like they can tell you exactly what they need and things like that. They have you build some sort of a rapport, but I don't market myself to those clients as retired military. Usually they find out as we're going through different parts of the situation or of the transaction. But for my military, I definitely do so that they know who I am and that we have that bond.
Yeah, I think I think you threaded that needle very carefully. It sounds like, because I know that we've got agents in our market and I'm in San Antonio, right? So military city, USA. You can't throw a stone without finding somebody who's retired or military or active, right? Where some folks are just nothing but I'm military, look at me, very vet bro in their process, whereas you have others that I've known them for years and they're like, oh yeah, back when I was in the Air Force. Like, you were in the Air Force? Like, you had no idea because it just almost kind of secret, they don't tell anybody, but you've kind of found, I guess sounds like really tailoring your marketing for your audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's kind of funny to see, like I have some return clients. I had a client recently that they found out, I think we were working on their fourth transaction since I've known them. And we were talking about something. And I said, well, when I was in the Navy, something. And they were like, you were in the Navy? How do we not know that about you? I said, I spent 22 years in the Navy. And they were just blown away that I had a military background. And I thought that was kind of funny because I thought everybody knew that once you start researching me and stuff, but I guess I knew them since they were so young that
Hmm.
we didn't have all the research back then. Or maybe I wasn't marketing correctly. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know that I think that's one of the things again. New agents coming out really struggle with how much do they lean into it, how much do they not. Where again, I think the balance you found works well, and I think even explaining your experience because even if you're not in the Navy or not around the Navy, you don't understand the significance of being a chief. You don't understand how exclusive of a club that is. Where even from the Army guys, it wasn't until I got to know a lot of Navy folks where there's this reverence for chief or the Marines for gunny. Like there's a reverence that the other services don't get. But even translating those skills there, depending on what level you serve, you may have been responsible for just as many people as these CEOs for this medium-sized company, and not
Yeah.
realizing that's the experience we had. I know when we were kind of doing the prep beforehand, you're talking about leadership as a early 20s and the amount of leadership that you have. And I know at least for me coming out of the military at 26, and they're like, do your elevator speech. And I was like, well, I was responsible for $1.2 billion worth of aircraft maintenance, and the life safety of all air crews and da da da. They're like, don't lie about your numbers. Like, no, I had 33 Apaches I was responsible for, blah, 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 blah. And they weren't lies. They were true numbers. But how have you been able to kind of explain your experience, from your time in the military that resonated well with that clientele?
Well, I think, first, I don't think that we as military give enough credit to what we did.
Mm.
I think a lot of civilians in the corporate world, or even not in the corporate world, in all sorts of like walks of life, many of them are amazed that we actually served. When it does come up, they're really surprised. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I would have done that when I was younger or something like that." You hear that a lot. But when they ask what you did, you talk about we still just give like a brief overview of what they did, but to us it's an everyday thing. Oh, I tracked nuclear submarines during the Cold War, and this because I was in during the tail end of the Cold War. I tracked
Mm.
nuclear submarines back in the beginning, and then I did career recruiting afterwards. They're like, wait, you did what? And they're just so amazed. Give yourself credit for that, because yeah, you can go through a resume. In fact, I always say, if you don't feel like you've done anything or you're ready for the world, write a resume of every single thing that you did. You will amaze yourself at what you did compared to your peers in the civilian world, because they haven't done any of the things that we have done. I mean, we've got 19-year-olds who drive submarines, but we don't give ourselves credit for that. Um, and my business is a lot about communication, and in almost in all of business, if you're starting a business, communicating and talking and building rapport with different people is important. A lot of times that just comes up in conversation. So if you could find a way to fit something in there to where you can earn instant credibility because you drove a submarine when you were 19 years old, or you were in charge of all of these helicopters or all of these office buildings or whatever you did. I mean, LSs have a huge LSs, I'm saying LSs like everybody knows what that is. People in logistics and supply, they have huge
Mm-hmm.
resumes. People in leadership, we have huge resumes compared to our civilian counterparts. I would just say build the rapport and keep talking about it. Not all the time, not drive them crazy with it, but as we're learning how to be civilians, we have an automatic respect because that's something they never would have done or never would have thought of doing when they were younger.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. So if you were to sit back and look at your transition now in hindsight after as many years you've been doing it, is there anything that you would have wish you'd done differently or had tried differently, or maybe the lesson that you learned really the hard way you wish you would have learned nearly as hard as you had learned it?
I think I would have been more confident, like I've discussed. Um, I I was very fortunate in recruiting. We do work with a lot of businesses, and we do work with a lot of civilian companies. And I recruited, like I said, JAGs and chaplains and physicians. So I was already in a lot of the civilian world. So that part I was comfortable with. But I see a lot of people when they get out, they're not comfortable with it. One of the things that I did was I got my real estate license on my last year of active duty. And then on terminal leave, I started selling houses. I also did as many classes as I could, transition classes, anything you can do before you transition. The Word, the the Microsoft 365, all of those classes. We might have had one Excel guy who was really good at our command, but those are tools that you can use in the civilian workforce that still not everybody knows how to use. So I would say get all those free classes under your belt and do as much research on jobs and what the jobs require before you get out, because that will kind of help you transition and start dressing before you get out. Because if you have to start dressing in civilian clothes and corporate attire before you get out, you might not feel so comfortable. But if you start dressing or start collecting some clothing items before you get out, it might help you transition that piece of it, because that is something. Or just take some transition classes. There are a lot of transition classes out there. I did all of that, and I still wasn't 100% prepared. But I mean, I think we all have to do something to get to that point. Sometimes if you're coming from an overseas command back to the U.S., you've got a couple different things you have to transition back to. You're coming from military to civilian, you're coming from another country back into the world you were, and then deciding where you're going to live. That's something as well. You might think that you're going to go home, and then you go back home and you decide this isn't me anymore. And some people go back home and they're like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. So I don't know if that answers your
No,
question, but
and I love the advice on take as many classes as you can. I know in my career, being a unit movement officer, packing up, shipping, receiving, all that kind of stuff was kind of one of those assignments that if you were good at your job, you got it, but nobody really wanted it, right? It was one of those things. And then as I transitioned to real estate, I started doing industrial real estate, where all of a sudden, like, yeah, we got to load all this in a train. I'm like, I've actually done this. That's not my job, but I understood this. I know how the boats work. I know how this. And quickly, it was a class that I didn't want to take. It was actually the most influential in my transition, because I suddenly knew all the logistics side of things, how to load, how dock high space worked. Would have never thought. I fought to have to take that class, and now in hindsight, that was the class that's had the biggest impact in my career from coming out of the military into the civilian world. So I love the sit down and take every class you can, because you don't know what's going to stick.
even early in your career, I mean, one of the most positive pieces of advice that I got early in my military career was the Navy's going to use you for everything they can, so use them back, which means try to get classes. Try to, put in those requests to take whatever class is on base, because they'll let you take them. They're free. They're going to benefit you. Even if they don't benefit you until 10 years down the road, they're free, and you get an idea of what there are. I took a tax class back when they had that. I don't know if the military still has the volunteer tax preparers on base anymore, but I took one of those years ago, and I learned so much about my own taxes. You're going to learn things that are going to help you as a person, and then you might even learn that you don't want to do something. When I was early, I took some computer classes, because computers, now I'm aging myself, computers were the wave of the future. I took a bunch of computer classing, and we talked about the coding and all that stuff. That's when I realized I do not want to be in that work in that field. It's not happening for me. I had to find something different. So, I mean, that's if you wait until you get out and you're paying for those, you find out, one, when you need an income coming in, that you don't want to do this. And two, that you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
It's
No,
for free.
great stuff, Jackie. Thank you so much for your time and sharing. And I think we probably could have kept going on. Unfortunately, we've got to stop.
I could go on
And
and on about it.
and maybe we'll get you back on and talk about some other things as well. But again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing. And hopefully, if any questions pop up, you're more than willing to jump in and ask those or answer those questions as some of our viewers may have.
Absolutely.
So appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, Jackie.
Thank you. I appreciate you.